Hey everybody, this is Dan.
This is Ron.
And this is a nominee questionable movies. And today we have two special guests. We have a special guest interviewer and a special guest interviewee. And if you guys would like to introduce yourselves.
I'm Brian Spellman. Dan asked me to be on the show when he asked Leighton to be on the show, who said yes.
And I'm Leighton. I'm Leighton Pierce.
And for those who don't know, Leighton has been making some absolutely gorgeous experimental video and film work for literally as long as I've been alive. And there's got to be like 100 plus movies at this point. Like you've been really busy.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how you count movies. If you count Instagram, then there's lots and lots. But
and TikTok.
And TikTok, Instagram, TikTok, and then regular movies. Yeah.
Yeah, I watched them. I forget which one, and suddenly it's like, it pops up and says TikTok. And I was like, why is it saying that? I don't get. Like, oh, this is TikTok. So
TikTok. It's a whole other world. It's kind of an amazing world. It's a complicated and amazing world. I taught a course in TikTok.
Really?
Last 2 semesters, which was kind of a blast. But it's really me learning about Gen Z and that whole world.
Uh-huh.
Pretty cool.
You're teaching at Cal Arts now?
I am. Yep. Yeah, I was dean here for 5 years, and then I stepped down. In the last 2 years, I've been just faculty, which is a much better life, believe me.
So do you have students out shooting footage a lot, or do you have them watching a lot of things? Do you try to balance that out?
Well, it depends on what I'm teaching, really. I'm teaching, maybe weirdly, but also it makes sense. I'm teaching the advanced undergraduates in experimental animation in a critique course for their final.
Okay.
So they're doing all kinds of things, but it's not crew. I mean, it's not crew-based, it's animation. So they do have people working with them. And in TikTok, they were shooting all the time, but that's just on their cameras. So that was the perfect lockdown in a way.
Exactly.
Oh, I was just going to ask, like, how do you pitch the university on a course? I've never heard of a course on TikTok. Like, it makes a lot of sense, but it's a completely new beast to me.
Well, I pitched it as, I called it micro narratives through TikTok. So we're dealing with what can you do in that under 1 minute format, 15 seconds to 1 minute. And then also just acknowledge that this is a huge, huge thing in the world, and it has so many production tools in it. It's kind of amazing how what used to be advanced things, green screen, and all these layering effects and other kinds of integrated AI-based things that they have in TikTok. So it's really to explore that realm. And it's also something you can do on your phone. You can just say, I'm going to make a TikTok now, and then 2 minutes later, you've made one. Might not be any good, or it might be good. But I really like the immediacy of TikTok. And that's also why I'm attracted to Instagram. So instead of working on a film for years or 2 years or months, it's like, okay, today I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to shoot some stuff. And then that night, make some, short little things that have meaning, but aren't the big sit down for half an hour or 90 minutes sort of thing.
You mentioned...
Oh, go ahead.
You mentioned the immediacy of it. And I was wondering if that's something that attracted you in your switch to digital from film when you went to high-8 and mini DV and then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that trajectory, I started in ceramics actually, and I was doing at the end performance raku because I was just I would make a pot, throw glaze on it, put it in the kiln all wet, and 15% of the time when you open the kiln, there'd still be a pot there. The rest of the time it's just rubble. So I was interested in that quickness, immediacy, and also the ephemerality of it. And then I did music, which is all, by its nature kind of ephemeral. You can make recordings, but in terms of hearing it, it comes and it disappears.
Yeah.
And started in film, and always wanted to find a way to do film that was more like improvisational jazz. And you can kind of make a film that way, but once you make it, it's a fixed object. So yeah, digital definitely took me into a more immediate realm, especially with nonlinear editing that you could have on your own computer. You didn't need $100,000, just, drop it on your computer. So once I could shoot and edit all like kind of in the same flow, that really changed my world. And that's actually why I didn't go back to 16. It's not like I don't like 16. It's just that I'm so attracted to this fast, immediate kind of filmmaking as a state of mind as opposed to a project. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like I feel like after I finished making the film, or after Brian and I finished making the film together, I moved into writing prose a lot because you get that immediate. I mean, like there's a lot of editing afterwards, but you get that, at least the one rush of just sort of the stuff in my head is showing up sort of how it looks in my head in a tangible form within 30 minutes to an hour.
I also would think about that. I mean, my first wife was a poet, so we talked a lot about poetic moments. So, and this part I'm making up, but it's theoretically true. If we went for a walk in the woods, like I go for a walk in the woods, and I experience the woods through recording and video, picture, and sound. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I shift into a different mode, and she would kind of find poetic moments, talking about whatever, your little images. I don't mean picture images. I mean kind of like images like imagination in your head form, and then we carry those away. So that's kind of how, in the last, I guess, year and a half or so, that's kind of how I've been working, where I just go out, and because I got an iPhone 12 and I justified the cost because I think of it as a camera that also texts and can talk and stuff. But with that, it's so immediate. It's always in my pocket. I just pull it out and I'm making films, and I shift into that filmmaker mode where I'm looking at the thing in a very different way. And sometimes you get something that's good. Sometimes you don't, but it doesn't matter because it's living life. Sorry.
Yeah. I really felt that I watched White Ash for the first time last night. 7 years late on that, the so-called Leighton Pierce expert, but I thought it was amazing. And I watched Deck this morning as well, which is what's that, like a couple years old or something?
Yeah, I think December 2018. I think it says 2019 on it. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, it's a couple years. Yeah,
I got that sense of looking at the world that way. I was very like physically touched by the films in a way.
Oh, thank you.
And like more than spiritually, it was almost like they grabbed me. And there was also like almost like flashbacks to childhood that I was feeling, or just throughout my life. And there's like an arc to the story in each of them, but I'm not so articulate that I can explain how it feels like a story. More like a piece of music would feel like a story.
You might be my perfect viewer. Thank you. I'm actually like that you said it's like a story, but you can't really articulate it. It's more like a feeling or more like music, because that's kind of, I'm trying to make films that have more to do with changing your state than having a story where someone says, "Hey, what was Deck about?" And you go, you can't really, it's too hard to talk about it. But if you can,
there was a cup in it, there was an ocean in it.
Yeah, it's about a cup and an ocean and lots of water, and but it's not really. Those are just things that happen. There's a moon, there's airplanes and trees, all that kind of good stuff. Yeah. So, anyways, I appreciate what you said, because it's like trying to make a film, but always trying to make it disappear in a way at the same time.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly how I do it, but I know that's kind of it's always been a goal for decades, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
I was going to say that the thing I noticed going back through a bunch of your films this week, one of the things I really love in a movie is the idea of like a film as a physical space you're inhabiting almost, versus like a story that's being told to you. And like when I go out and I shoot like random footage that I'm going to try to put into something later, in the back of my head, the thing I'm always trying to capture is like this time I got stoned when I was 20 and I was walking through the woods and the sky looked purple and all the trees were kind of waving around, and I never quite got there, but I think you've gotten a lot closer to that. capturing that than I have at this point. I mean,
I also think of these. Well, this is a difficult word because it's kind of a trigger for certain kinds of thoughts. But I do think of it as what I'm doing is psychedelic, but not in the kind of Paisleys and fractals and all that stuff. But how do you kind of get into the mind and kind of crack open what your mind does with shots and sounds and an experience in time? Like Deck is, I don't know, like just under half an hour. So I am trying to make this space that you enter, but it's really your own space. And I'm just kind of giving you a little, it's like lubricating like doorways into other things. That's what I'm hoping to do. And it's a very hard thing to do in a direct, explicit way. So it's this thought I have, and it's how I evaluate edits and shot structures. If it kind of does that to me, then I leave it in and figure out how it's going to connect to other things to keep it going. It's difficult to talk about because it's not like a story about a dog or a person. You know?
Well, and I think that you're touching on a really important point, which I don't think I've been able to articulate until now. But a lot of what I kind of dislike in certain narrative films is that they're almost crowding out the viewer.
Yeah.
Like there's this very distinct like viewer film duality that needs to be in for, like, a lot of times it's called mastery or something like that. But like I really appreciate a film where there is space where watching it is its own sort of creative process.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very interested in this kind of. It's kind of like a continuum in my mind, and I first really hit against this wall when I made 50 Feet of String. I don't know if you've seen that or seen it recently, but that film, it's about a little less than an hour long, and there was a version where I had people in it. I mean, there are people in it, but they're kind of just fragments. But actually, it tipped into, oh no, now I'm wondering what's going to happen to this character as opposed to just a little kid running through the frame. And that was kind of like opening up this pathway towards narrative. And I realized that what that does is it collapses the experience down, because now I'm wondering what's going to happen. And then I'm involved in that. And we all I like to do that. I watch all kinds of things like what's going to happen and is she going to survive? You know, all this kind of stuff. We like to do that. But in that film, I saw that I tipped into that. So I backed away and I took all that stuff out to kind of get more space for the viewer to just, I think you call it a space, to kind of inhabit that space and kind of poke around in their brains because they're just still sitting there. Over the course of the film.
Yeah, and it's really interesting you say that it kind of starts collapsing the narrative, because Brian and I are both graduates of the John Jost University. And like a thing I've noticed in a lot of John's films is that, like, there are points where he just gets like, I'm just going to say he gets like bored of people. Like he'll be following two people having a conversation, and then he's like, whatever's going on outside this window must be more interesting than this conversation. And then you get this gorgeous shot outside the window, and it's sort of like it. I don't feel like I've been able to articulate it quite the way you articulated, but yeah, he's like afraid of the narrative collapsing what he thinks are the better or the more interesting parts of the film to him.
Yeah, or it might be also a kind of acknowledgement of how our minds work. Mm-hmm. Like we're sitting there talking to a person, we're having a little thing, and then you just kind of, we're always drifting off. That's kind of our normal mode. And that's interesting. And then we tell the story, I had coffee with my friend Bob, and I tell you this very nice little compressed story. But in fact, when I was having coffee with my friend Bob, I was paying attention to, I'm remembering times when we could do such a thing as have coffee. But I'm listening to the cappuccino machine. I see the woman behind the counter talking to someone. I'm going off into all these things. I'm remembering what I have to do later. And that's all in coffee with Bob. But when I tell you about it, I said, we just talked about, I don't know, whatever. but that's the collapsing of narrative that is attractive also to it. I never want to imply that I think this collapse into narrative is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing, but a lot is lost in terms of experiencing current life when you do that. So I'm always trying to back away, kind of take us in a little bit, so there's a little bit of idea of something coming, but not too far, so that then you just kind of get involved in what's going to happen, because it's kind of over at that point. I mean, for me, the work I'm doing.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because like I feel like in my own work with the prose, a lot of how I'm dealing with, like a lot of the prose I'm kind of dealing with stories people have told me. Like I grew up in an area where there's not a lot to do, so most of how people entertain each other is by telling anecdotes. And so there's almost these two contradictory impulses between the prose and the film work, where like in the prose, I'm trying to collapse as much of the narrative as I can until it feels almost abstract. Like I just keep cutting details, having these abrupt shifts in time without necessarily indicating it. And then in the video work, yeah, it's a lot more just sort of like just the gaps that would have been cut out of the prose work. At least since I met Brian, my first movie was pretty much all just collapsed people talking. Collapse might not be the right word, but it's like a lot of MTV cutting of like talking to townies.
But even that, and I'm speculating again here, but there's the story that someone's telling an anecdote, right? And the interest is probably not that much in the anecdote. It's more the human and that relationship between you and the person who's telling the story. And the story is just there to kind of establish a relationship. And sometimes the anecdotes are interesting. I'm not saying that, but it seems to be the main thing you think you're doing, but actually you're learning to be with a person, or you're being repulsed by a person one way or another. But I think that also speaks to it's kind of part of the same thing we're talking about filmmaking, the experiencing of film, and how do we engage in that. I listen to Sam Harris podcasts sometimes. I don't know if you know who he is, but anyway, he just introduced someone, and this one little phrase really stopped me. I was walking, and he said, "Okay, for the next hour, I would like you to replace your thoughts with whoever he was introducing. I can't remember." But the idea of replacing my thoughts with someone else's, I realized that is what we do when we read or when we watch a lot of TV or movies. We're kind of giving up our thoughts, and that's kind of what the narrative is. Okay, I will just follow your narrative, and that means giving up all the noise in my head as much as possible. Somehow that seems to relate to all this, and I'm trying to not really replace someone's thoughts with my thoughts. I'm trying to just like redesign the room in a way, you know.
So I had an unrelated question. I know we're on a really important topic here, but I'm just really curious what made you put all your work online on Vimeo? Because when I was really young, John's actually the one that introduced me to your films, showed me that Senses of Cinema article, which must have been like 2004 or something.
Oh, around there,
yeah. I was really young, maybe like 19. Couldn't find any of your films besides your website. I was too broke to buy any of the DVDs at the time. They started popping up on YouTube, and then all of a sudden it looks like you were like, well, I might as well just start releasing everything. And through Vimeo, it slowly, virtually all your films came out. The only one I haven't been able to find is one I remember that you shot in a laundromat. It was an early film.
Oh, that's not on there?
Something with change.
It's called Miracle of Change, yeah.
Miracle of Change, yeah.
In Syracuse when I was a grad student.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's no, I thought it was there. I'm not a very good custodian of my public presentation. But yeah, I just decided, okay, I was making like, on a good year, maybe $500 or something from rentals and all this and all the hassle. And also the fact that it's an artificial masking of the work. I figured I'm making this stuff. If people want to see it, even in the bad quality that Vimeo was when it first came out, not bad, but not as bad as it is now. So I just said, I'm going to put everything out there. I don't care. I have another, I'm making my money through academia. That's
right.
And it's the privilege I have of I'm just going to send it out, and it's all free and it's all open. And, you know, I kind of prefer that. So that's why I did it. And I'm not done. There's things like Miracle of Change and probably a few others that I've just not gotten my act together and put it. Actually, this is the problem with Vimeo. Whatever you post last is the first thing that shows up.
I found that annoying, actually. I had to go and like scroll down, and it took quite a lot of time to get.
Yeah, my project that who knows if I'll get to this, because I've been planning to do this for 3 years, is to just take everything down and load everything back up in chronological order instead of, you know, like there's a 1983 film after a 2019 film, but that appears at the top. So that's slowed me down because the project has grown. Maybe I need like to hire someone to do this because it just seems like tedious work to me. But anyway, that's why, because why not just let it be out there and people see it and they can talk to me about it or not, but whether they like it or not, it doesn't matter, but it's just available. It's kind of like how Instagram is functioning for me now too.
Yeah, well, it's appreciated.
Although Instagram has another interesting factor and I'm relatively new. I've been on Instagram in a very small way, but in the last 18 months, I've been doing much more. And it took me a while to figure out that you put something on there and then you get, you know, likes and views, but it only lasts for about a week. I mean, it stays there, but it is ephemeral. It kind of happens, poof, and then it goes away, and maybe someone goes and digs and finds something and likes it, you know, that you did months ago, but it's pretty rare. And I find I don't go that deep. If I find someone new, I will go, you know, maybe, I don't know, a few pages into their feed, and then I'll just say, okay, that was pretty cool, and then move on. So
thumb flicks.
What?
A few thumb flicks.
Scroll, watch them, like, oh yeah, and then, you know, you kind of go down a rabbit hole maybe if it's really interesting. But there's something I like about that too, that something pops up and it's kind of like poof, and then it fades away, and it's still there, but it's not really part of the flow anymore. So that. I see that actually as a positive thing, things that happen and then they go away. So you're really kind of creating a flow, and this makes it more like music. It happens and it goes away. It happens and it goes away. And it's kind of like life too. We think we have memories, but those are all constructed things too. Life, we move through it and things fade away. So I kind of like that about Instagram.
You mentioned music. You studied jazz as well as ceramics, right?
Yeah, I played music, well, kind of most of my life since I was pretty little. I played guitar and did a number of things. And I did, anyway, I went to the museum school in Boston. That's where I did ceramics. And then I did electronic music. And then I went to, I didn't finish my degree. I went to University of Iowa because a bunch of friends went there. And I went there as a music major. So I thought I was going to be a composer. That's really what I went back to school to finish my undergrad degree. But that's where I took a film class, and then I got distracted for like a bunch of decades. Although I still think I'm composing. Like when I do something like Deck or White Ash, I think those are very much composed films.
I think in the description of Deck, it says you could watch it. You could just listen to it and not watch it. And I tried just closing my eyes a couple of times, and it works as a piece of music, like music concrete kind of.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about how you edit the audio, because it seems like simultaneously, like a lot of it's clearly not direct sync sound just because there's a lot of like fades and cuts going on, but it's not I'm trying to think how to put this. It feels kind of like an ambient musical composition to go along with the images more than just a direct one-to-one, like this is the sound I heard when I was staring at the sky. Or
Well, you're right. And actually, there's in Deck and White Ash and Retrograde Premonition, all the films, the videos are kind of like that. There is no sync sound because it's not possible, because all of those are made from long exposure single photographs. So it's actually animation, like 5 or 10 seconds. That's one picture, and then I have to build those into the videos you see. So there is no such thing as sync sound in that process,
Right.
10 second. So then I make a whole bunch of these things and I weave them together. I'm always thinking about sound when I'm doing it, but I edit pretty much all mute. And then sound, which is the part I love the most once I'm in it, but I'm also the most terrified of, and I procrastinate because it's just so scary to start. And then I start with little things. I create sync sound events. Like the cup gets set down, you hear a clunk. Something like as simple as that, or the cup, I drink out of the cup and you hear the drinking. So I start building as if it's a normal movie in a way, an environment and certain particular sounds. And then I start throwing in off-screen stuff that seems to kind of, I don't know, make you move from one thing to another. Lots of helicopters and airplanes flying over, and those kind of sounds, because they come with a nice arc that allows you to link things together. So yeah, it is a musique concrète, ambient composition, and I really do like doing that. I spend a lot of time doing that over and over, many versions. Like Deck, I don't know how many versions I had of that, and some of the older ones are maybe better than the one I ended up with, because at a certain point you just say, okay, enough, move on. Because I could imagine doing the sound for Deck forever. Just do another one. Why not? But anyway, sometimes you gotta move on and look at some different pictures.
Speaking of sound, there's also you've got some of the videos are using found footage. So they're using, looks like old. I don't know if they were originally silent, but there's the people rowing.
Yeah, the Lumieres.
Yeah.
Those are Lumieres, and that's when I stepped down from being dean. I was actually kind of traumatized and beat up and totally exhausted and it was not a good emotional time. So I was just saying, okay, how do I want to get back into just making things in a fresh mind? That was one thing. The other thing is I had this idea to do a TikTok class, so that was how I started to make TikToks. I said, there's like all these beautiful Lumiere films, and why not just start building sound to that? And I've done this before. I mean, when I taught sound design at Iowa, that was one of the first assignments. Everyone picks a Lumiere and you have to build sound to it.
That's cool.
It's not uncommon, I think, to do that. But in the TikTok world, I said, okay, now I can use music, kind of popular music. And I just built those as kind of sound exercises. And that's my feeling. But there's very subtle little things that I noticed, subtle little things. When after the opium's inhaled, the sound changes in a subtle way. So I kind of got into all that. But those are the only, I don't usually use found footage, not because there's anything wrong with it. I just would rather make images. But for the Lumieres, I did.
And I think it draws an important kind of line between like reading the visuals of a film and reading the visual environment that you exist in. They're two innately connected they're on a continuum, I guess. They're not completely separate things. And I think what you're saying about the audio being a way of almost like a secondary reading of the visuals is really important, like sort of a frame on top of a frame. And that was the thing that really struck me when I was going through them this week, is how the audio, it's not like insisting on itself, but it's very much intentional. And I think just that intentionality beyond any other factors, it's sort of like in Bresson, you'll have like these very common noises, but he's putting them together very intentionally with an eye towards creating and just sort of almost like displaying the shape of a thought. Does that make any sense?
That's displaying the shape of a thought. That's what you just said, right?
Yeah.
Garbled. Yeah, that I think is a really beautiful way to say it, because that's, it's not about the image, I mean, the picture, and it's not about the sound, but it really is about the image in the head, which is another way of thinking of thought, maybe. But anyway, that's how I think about it. So yeah, the sound, you got a picture, like just use the Lumieres because those are kind of very fixed, and I didn't shoot them. Oh, the pyramid one I like too. And this just is what it is. So how can you both support that image? If you saw the pyramid one, it's just pyramids and then people walk by with camels. That's it. So that's the image. So it, that's what I mean. We're not good eyewitnesses. We all know this. We don't, what we see and hear and experience, we don't maintain a certain ideal fixed nature of that in our heads. So that's where you have room to play. And that actually is where sound comes in, I think, a lot, because sound is a thing in many films. People don't attend to it. You look at the image and like that, people would say, oh, it's so beautiful. I go, well, thank you. But I know that part of that beauty, part of their experience came from the way the sound was working, but relatively few people, like a secret thing at work, sort of like that. Yeah. There is a backwards recorded, this is beautiful throughout. So that might be part of the reason they liked it. I don't know.
Do you ever look at your own footage as like found footage? Do you go back through old stuff from like a couple of years ago or years ago? I mentioned because I have this really old, like mini DV tapes, SD from years ago. I have like a bag of them of just me playing like 100 tapes from like back when I was a kid. And I want to just like, upload them all into an editor and just play with them. It would be, because I probably don't even remember shooting half of the stuff. It's just an interesting concept, like going back to your own memories is found.
No, I think there's two things that come up. One is I've done that somewhat, but more commonly, I mean, not counting Instagram, that's a different world, but right. Before 2 years ago, I would shoot and I almost couldn't really use things I shot for 6 months at least, because I needed to forget the experience of shooting it and then just see it for what it is, if that makes sense. So it's like,
it makes so much sense. Yeah,
so it moves into found footage that you have no relationship to. I mean, you do, but you kind of forgot all the details of who was there and what was going on. You just forget all that and you just see this picture, and then you're free to do with it what it seems to be saying to do. And if you went back further into like stuff you shot as a kid, even better, because you have all these memories that are going to conflict with things and kind of mess it around, and you're going to see, oh, that was kind of shocking to see this birthday party or whatever, and then you can pull from it. And yeah, so I like that, because I think there's
like a movie review or something, I got to get it finished really quick. It's a different story, but any other kind of pros, if I can wait like a year or two to edit it, my rule of thumb is kind of, it needs to look like somebody else wrote it so I can be appropriately brutal. That might be kind of like
exactly. That's another way to look at it. Yeah. Yeah, you have to kind of just say, okay, this is something I did, whatever. And then you look and go, wow, that sucks. Or, wow, I never even thought this. And it can be a seed for a whole film in a way. And jumping up to Instagram, because I'm not doing that on Instagram. I'm shooting, editing, and posting, right? Within, a short period of time, usually a day or two, a few days. But I do in the back of my head say what I'm really doing is building little bricks. And then when I go back to LA, I'm actually somewhat at I have a gear limitation because we're in Massachusetts taking care of my father-in-law who's 99. So I didn't bring that much stuff out here. I thought we'd be here for a month. It's been 5 months. So when we go back to LA, I think I'm going to take these bricks and try to make a building out of them.
Where are you in Mass?
Acton, Mass, about 20 miles west of
Gotcha.
Boston.
Yeah, I'm in a little bit ways west.
Yeah.
So you and Ron are basically neighbors.
I'm in Cambridge.
Oh, you're in Cambridge?
Yeah.
Well, for me, I mean, I've always lived in Four Seasons, and going to LA, this was 7 years we've been in LA. It's been painful. Actually, when autumn comes and friends send me pictures of the trees, I just kind of get super depressed. So I really enjoy. We live in LA. We winter in Massachusetts, which is kind of a weird idea, but I've loved the snow and every day is different in terms of weather. So I kind of miss
I
it.
see that in your Instagram now. It's like you're like, yeah, snow. You're like a kid, like with the eyes.
I'm sucking it up.
I've been loving those ice videos. Those are gorgeous, and I don't have a lot more to say about it, but they're just very. It's a space I like to get into when I'm on my phone.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I like those too, but sadly, I think today I'll go out later. It might be over. Yesterday there's just a little bit of snow and a little bit of ice, so maybe it'll come back.
It's supposed to be cold again this week. We might get some later in the week. Might get one last storm.
Oh, good.
We're lucky.
Yeah, I just like these changes that come, So.
Well, today we're supposed to get gale force winds, right?
Oh, we got them yesterday over here.
right.
Yeah, they're nasty.
I know that like New York City, we're hipsters, so we get everything a few days ahead of Massachusetts. But like I had my windows were like shaking. I opened the window briefly, and it was it almost sounded like movie sound effects. It was just like a lot of whooshing.
Cool.
It was. Nothing broke, so that it did manage it. I heard something like fall to the floor. It was windy enough to push a floppy disk out of my computer. I found
wait a minute. Is this like what, floppy disk?
Like a big.
Wasn't a
Here, let me
poltergeist?
grab the floppy disk. It'll make a little more sense.
I thought I'd fallen into like some kind of time machine thing.
Oh yeah,
Daniel collects old things.
Yeah. And he gets them to work if they don't.
Yeah, so this is like this is the floppiness of my head for comparison. My parents had an old TRS-80, like the Radio Shack computers.
Yeah.
So this is the operating system, and I've been trying to get the thing to work.
That's the operating system.
But you can't get it to do anything because there's no operating system inside. It doesn't even have a graphics card. It's just like a big. But yeah, the wind was enough to knock this right out of the floppy drive.
Wow.
But
Well, don't lose that. That's
definitely no. Yeah. No,
Got the whole operating system there.
it's not easy to get Tris DOS anymore.
get what?
TRS DOS, Tandy Radio Shack disk operating system.
Yeah.
Get it on eBay for $200.
$200? That's as much as a computer's worth. Yeah.
If it's something so hard to get a hold of, something you can copy.
Probably. Well, it's not so much a matter of like, I'm sure I could go on archive.org and just download that in like half a second, but figuring out how to get it onto that floppy disk again, because like they don't make drives for those kinds of floppy disks that'll go USB.
That's another era. There've been so many. That's also like in Iowa we had a flood, and all my maybe I don't know. Does anyone remember Jazz drives? JAZ.
Yep.
Oh, vaguely, yeah.
Yep. They were kind of like zip disk.
Yeah. There was all those things. Anyways, they all got rusty. And I don't know. That's another ephemeral. Okay, I'm just okay with that. I wasn't at the time, but.
Did you end up? It seems like Iowa was a big part of your life. Did you end up there for school after? Because you grew up upstate, right?
I grew up upstate. I went to school in Boston, lived kind of in this area for a bunch of years, and then ended up in Iowa because I wanted to actually get a BA, because I never finished that at the museum school. So I followed friends who were going out to be in the writer's workshop. I said, hey, why not? I've never lived in the Midwest. So I went out there, I finished my BA, got introduced to film, came back east, and went to Syracuse, and then went to New York and was working for a while. And then a job came up in Iowa, and I said, okay, I'll go to Iowa for, 3 to 5 years for this tenure track film job, where they wanted someone to build a sound design course or curriculum. So I said, perfect. So I went out, I got the job, and then I was there for 26 years, because that's how things happen.
Yeah.
They were I was actually talking to my friend, because he works in government and he always has to work. and they gave me so many leaves, times off, because that's what you have to do when you're in Iowa to keep faculty. So you have another semester off. So I really produced a lot of work there, and a lot of it has to do with the generosity of the institution that, allowed that to happen. Mm-hmm. So yeah, 26 years at Iowa and then back to New York.
And so when you got to the film program, you mentioned you were originally thinking you were going to become an electronic composer. Was there a specific film or a specific moment in the film program that stood out to you that kind of changed your course?
Well, not so much a specific film, but it's more the material. Because I was mystified. How do films, they have edits? I don't know. How does that work? How do you actually make an edit? It was totally mysterious to me. And I was tired of electronic music concerts where you go and you're sitting in the theater and you're looking at a tape recorder, because this was the days of tape recorders, and you're just this tape recorder. It was very weird to me. So I said I should make movies so I have something to look at when we're listening to the music. And then I just took a Super 8 course, and I'm going, oh, you just tape them together and you get an edit. And then when you do that, something happens. That's, the magic of editing. Two things next to each other, boom, you have a new thing. So I got into the material. Cameras, I understood. I'd been taking pictures for a while, but editing and then constructing sound to the picture, that really attracted me. So it was kind of through those aspects that sucked me in, and also seeing a few experimental films where I was kind of released from, I was anxious because how am I going to make a story? I don't know what I want to make a story about. And then Franklin Miller, who was one of the faculty, showed a few of his pieces that were quite a range of things. Some kind of psychodrama stuff. Another one was simply two shots. There's probably many versions of this now, but he had two cameras, two 60mm cameras. One was pointing at the sunset, and the other was pointing towards the east, and they just superimposed these two pictures, and I went, wow, even that's a movie? And then it freed me to, play around. So I just got stuck in it, and I never quite got out. But I also saw it as the same thing as making electronic music. I mean, musique concrète was really what I was doing, recording and then building things. I realized, wait, it's the same thing. It's just now you got picture, and you have the meaning that comes from picture that is rich. So that's...
Well, musique concrète at that point, that was still a lot of taping together pieces. So like at least on a practical standpoint, it's almost exactly the same.
Yeah. You splice the audio tape together, and then you do layers, and you have a synthesizer. You process it in different ways. But yeah, it was very much like filmmaking, with strips of quarter-inch tape that you tape together and then layer, and the process was very similar. But meaning exploded. It's also why I got out of ceramics. I started getting bored with these things that were cool objects, but I was going, they're just kind of things, and that's why I went back to music more. I mean, I'm saying this as if this is a thought that I clearly had. This is more what I figured out retroactively, looking back.
Do you feel like your work in ceramics has influenced the film work beyond just sort of pushing you out of ceramics into the film work?
No, I think it did. I mean, I've threatened to do a class called Everything I Know About Filmmaking I Learned from Ceramics. It would be a very short course because I don't think there's a lot of depth to that, but it could be like a 2 or 3 day workshop.
I think we have a title for the episode, Ron.
Yeah, please. Yeah, that would be great. But it's because, I mean, you can be a production potter and you just make things over and over. But what I liked is you get a piece of clay and then you prepare it. You knead it. You wedge it and you do all this stuff to the clay to get it the way you want. And it's some size and some kind of clay. You put it on the wheel, because I did a lot of wheel throwing. And then without knowing what I was going to do, I was like, okay, I'm going to make something from this piece of clay. So it was very much performance pottery. And when you're making, has anyone made anything on a potter's wheel? Any of you?
I've broken things.
Could say the same. Yeah, I did one for an art class years and years ago.
My mother's really good at it, but I did not inherit that skill.
Well, I mean, what you said, it breaks when you put the clay down there. If you go too fast, it'll break. If you work for it kind of too long, it'll fall apart.
Right.
If you extend it too much, so there's all of these things you can do that you have to kind of feel the edge. Like you're going too fast, slow down. You're going too slow because it's all going to get soggy. Speed up. You can't extend that lip this much; it'll fall over. So there's all this kind of push pull. I think that's kind of like how I think about filmmaking. When mainly in the editing and shooting, it's more you catch whatever, but in the editing, kind of how much can you push and how much can you pull. And the other thing I learned, this was early on, I had a teacher, I was apprenticed to this guy, and he said, you know, you're making great pots, but you're ignoring the foot, you know, the bottom of the pot and the lip. You need to pay attention to those because those matter. And then I think that's kind of like filmmaking. The beginning and the ending matter a lot. The middle, you know, you just have to fill it up with stuff.
Right.
And I say that as a joke, but actually I think it's true. You need to start, people go, oh, and then you do a bunch of stuff. And then however you end it, they kind of go, oh. I don't know if that performance of, oh, was meaningful. It's not going to work in a transcription. That's
no. I think it feels like, because I always think when I'm editing a film, like the very beginning of it is the edge of the frame. The very end of it is a chance to introduce a different frame. But when people are reading the thing, it's almost the opposite of like a painting. Like a painting, your eyes are drawn to the center. In a film, I think people tend to try to use the bookends of the runtime as kind of a skeleton key for the rest of it. So you need to kind of play to that outsized or not outside, but larger importance that the audience puts on those parts of the film.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And anyways, going back, that's like the lip and the foot of the pot,
right?
In a way, I might be stretching this analogy more than is healthy. Oh, and then the stuff I already mentioned about raku, where you just throw it in and hope for the best, and either comes out rubble, or you got this pot with all these. The cool thing about it, the heat shock is so great. All the tension within the clay is revealed through twisted cracks. So anyway. I see it as all related.
Yeah, now that you mentioned pottery and started making those metaphors, I totally see it and hear it in your films. It's like you put the images and the sounds on a potter's wheel. Sometimes literally when it starts to go like this, but it very much feels like you're forming them with your hands.
And I think we probably all know that you can overwork an image or a scene or a segment. You just keep going over it, and then it just kind of loses all of its meaning. That's the same.
Yeah.
Just got too soggy. And then you save those because maybe, 6 years later you'll find it and go, oh, it's dried out. Now I can read it.
I feel like I've seen a lot of soggy films now. Soggy was not the word going through my head, but they're out there. Although I don't know, maybe they dried out since the last time I saw them, but.
Yeah, well, being a teacher, you see a lot of soggy films. You see some that are just too dry and brittle, and then you see the ones in the middle. I think we might be going too far here. Yeah, my notes, too soggy.
Yeah. Well, I had a friend, I'm not going to name him, but he's an English professor, and he's been an English professor for a few decades, and he said that reading student papers is kind of like eating sand. Yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard. Well, I imagine papers would for me would be harder. Films, I mean, I'm very interested in teaching. I'm actually committed to teaching, as I see this as part of the same practice in a way. And what I've figured out more recently is it's not about liking or disliking or, it's like another cliche. It's really about just using it as a way to try to understand the student. And once I focus on the person, it's always interesting. And then through that conversation, we usually come up with some way to make the film better. But instead of focusing on the object, it's more on the relationship between me and whoever I'm talking to, the student.
Yeah, I had a film teacher in high school, actually. He's the one that introduced me to John's films, introduced me to yours films. So it's all kind of full circle. And he, like, I was making some pretty good stuff. He thought, and when I started making stuff that wasn't as good, he took it so personally and like checked on me to make sure I was okay. He's like, "Is there anything going on at home? Like, the quality of your work has gone down so much. Like, what's going on here?" So it was interesting how invested he saw the work as like related to the person.
Yeah,
he probably took it a little far, but
yeah, I think it's important, and it has what's improved my life as a teacher, because I always have interesting exchanges with students instead of the dread of, oh man, this film really sucks. What am I going to say to this person? How am I going to do it? If you're talking with the person, it's always interesting. Well, except for a few exceptions. I mean,
exceptions that prove the rule.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you just have a person, we don't have to talk about it.
Okay. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting, because I found like the older I get, I'm much more interested in watching like a particularly bad B movie versus something that's competently made, kind of in the middle of the road. I think because it tells you more about the person, and I think there's definitely different schools of thought. Like, right, there's that thing Henry James said, but what is it, like, good writing tells you about the subject, bad writing tells you about the writer. But he was also pretty cranky at that point. I think that was what his like failed attempt to get into the theater was going on in the 1890s. But I definitely find, especially because so much of the visual content that we all consume now is much more related to creations of identity than some idea of like film as an art object, or not film specifically, but moving images as like an art object outside the person. Which I think goes back to the Instagram and TikTok thing, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to find a way to not talk about identity.
Oh, okay.
Just because it's such a... I mean, it's interesting that is partly why I did TikTok also, because identity politics is very present, certainly with young people. So I'm interested in figuring that out and how people draw these lines. And in fact, for that class, I had him read an article by, what's his name, Sapolsky, a pretty interesting guy who teaches at Stanford, who does a lot of YouTube lectures. He's kind of great. But anyways, he was talking about, this is your brain on nationalism. And he's talking about chimpanzees and how we carry bias. It's kind of part of our... it's part of our DNA to be biased, because it's a survival thing. And basically the result, the conclusion of this article, he doesn't quite say it. We just have to increase our range. We have to make our tribe bigger. So instead of saying my tribe is only white men, I have to say, no, it's human beings. I mean, the more I can get it to that size, then my bias then is, I just get biased against things like squirrels and aliens. But I mean, that's kind of how I see identity. I'm assuming we all are carrying around tons of biases, and how do we then use our other part of our brain that's a little more modern to kind of say, why, and can I just include these people who I feel some kind of bias against into my tribe? And some people you want to leave out because they've done bad things to you or are about to do bad things to you, but others you bring in. So anyway, that was not a very good job.
I wasn't trying to bring it into identity as identity politics. I guess I'm just sort of thinking of it as like, there's a lot of people I only know through the internet. Their mental construction of who I am is probably a combination of like chat messages I have sent them, still images I put onto various social media things, maybe like me talking on this podcast. That's about it. And that kind of fascinates me, because it is this sort of there is this through line in the work that is sort of, I'm trying to think of it, but it's like if I shoot a lot of stuff that I don't think is connected and I just run it in sequence, it's not necessarily going to be a good film, but there's going to be a coherence there that was unintended. And I kind of think of that as like myself.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
there's some kind of like Lou Reed said when he was recording the Velvet Underground records that he would just finish recording whatever he wanted to record, and the album was done when the label came either looking for the thing or with a check, and then you listen to the records and they seem like coherent individual objects, but the only through line there is, I guess, whatever Lou Reed was fixating on it at that point in time.
Okay, I understand that. That's interesting because that takes me back to Instagram, because I go back and I look at my profile page and it's unintentional, because I didn't know. I mean, when 2 months ago, I didn't know what I'd be doing yesterday, and I post these things just because it kind of fits. And I am conscious when I'm looking at it, I'm going, what does this mean to people who have no clue who I am or what anything is about? When they just see this, how are they constructing some entity called Leighton Pierce? And I don't know the answer to it, but I find it pretty interesting. It does mean I'm cautious to a certain extent. I don't have pictures of my breakfasts and the beautiful things I cook for lunch. I'm not doing that, and I like seeing those when other people do it. But I'm trying to keep it. I am trying to limit what it's saying there, so they're just getting one part of me. They don't see me driving around, and I'm also not talking to the camera. Like, that's part of the reasons I think why I'm not popular on TikTok, because I never went into that realm where I'm going, hey, and I'm talking right to the camera.
Well, I was going to say those shots of water moving under ice are getting a little political, but I'm teasing you. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I think there is.
I don't think you need to worry about that.
I think there is a global warming aspect to this, but that would be forcing it a bit. But I could start captioning it with all political stuff, and then therefore it would actually have that.
Also, I feel like running water is something that everyone should. Watching running water is something that everyone should do.
Well, running water is a very political issue in Houston right now.
That's true.
Running water is it's a political issue. It has been a political issue in many places. Flint, that's a different kind of water. But yeah, there's something, if it's not flooding you or poisoning you, it's really nice.
I've always made sure I live near some kind of stream or river or so I just somewhat being close to water is very important to me.
It's important. Yeah, I've been to the LA River. Have you been to the LA River?
I was in LA once for about 2 hours waiting for a bus, and I got food poisoning. That's my experience of LA.
That sounds like a perfect story.
I threw up on the bus, and that was.
Wow! Oh man, that sounds.
They sold me a burger in the bus station. They're like, "This is the best burger you ever have." It was okay.
Yeah, you might live and learn. No, that's not where you go for your.
It was so good your body rejected it. It wasn't ready.
Yeah, that is. There's very little water in LA, and the LA River is more like a drainage ditch, really. So, and we're 90 minutes to 2 hours from the ocean,
right?
Or if you could drive, maybe at 3 a.m. would probably be about 20 minutes, but so yeah. I'm not really around water out there. It's strange for me.
And so I know Brian had a few questions prepared.
We ran through a lot of them. I was curious about one story that John told me. He claims that you claim that you met him in a bar in Idaho in the 80s when he had long hair, and he has no recollection of this meeting. I don't know if it's because he had one too many.
I have no recollection of that claim. I've never been to Idaho, first of all. Maybe he meant Iowa.
He might have meant Iowa, yeah. But I'm pretty sure I read Idaho. It might have been a typo or something, autocorrect.
I've never, as far as I know, maybe I drove through a corner of it, but no, I've never, it wasn't in Idaho, but he did come to Iowa. I don't know, this might have been the late 80s. And we hung out in a bar and he talked with my colleagues about riding motorcycles. We had all that stuff. So I do remember that. And he gave me a VHS copy of Last Chance for a Slow Dance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great, I have a copy. Thank you so much. And then a few months later, I stuck it in and it was just blank. So that's my memory of meeting him the first time. And then I've met him a number of times after that.
John, if you're listening, I feel like I've ordered a few DVDs from you like that. So,
well, he used to send me like the reject DVDs. Sometimes I would just get a package of like 5 DVD, and like I have a computer so I can get to, but he has those like incredibly elaborate menus, and sometimes if you put it into a standard DVD player, it'll just loop through the menu. Right, because he's using it as like an intro. Like if you put it in a computer, you can rip the VOB file and you can get to the actual meat of it. But it's kind of I've never seen any other DVD structured like that. I'm not sure how he gets the program to do that.
Some special burning program or something. Anyway, DVD. I remember those. Those are also things I like to forget.
Right. No, I just I put the movies into like a chip in my head now.
Yeah, it saves time. You just kind of instantly get the whole thing.
Yeah, I just download it.
I know you guys wanted to ask Leighton about ASMR because it's like,
oh yeah, Ron had a Ron is disowning the question. Okay,
disowning that question. I wasn't going to ask it.
Oh, okay, then I'll ask it. So Ron has never seen any of your work before I sent him. Well, Brian sent me a few Vimeo links. He kind of curated a screening list for both of us, and then I passed it on to Ron. And the thing he mentioned was that, and I think this goes back to the construction of audio discussion we were having earlier, but he was like, this feels a lot like an ASMR video. Which, have you ever seen any ASMR?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think where these are. I think on Instagram, but probably from a year ago. There might be on TikTok too, but I did some. When I don't know, several years ago, students said ASMR. I'm going, what? I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, so then I went into it and I kind of went down a deep rabbit hole. I really like much of it. It's weird. Some of the whispering people who are...
Some of them get like really uncomfortably sexual.
Yeah, what I'm talking about, hey, and then the patting the mic, and it's like, well, yeah. Both, it's a push-pull sort of thing again. But I said, wow, this is really great. So I did a few, and I don't know. I'm fundamentally attracted to it, although I think it's like not really fitting into the ASMR world where you say you're going to do half an hour and really going to take you in, we're going to make you feel better. I'm not so much interested in that. I just like attention to sound. So you can find these. There's some where I have gloves on and I'm rolling masking tape in my fingers in front of this is a technical thing, in front of a microphone that picks up extremely high frequencies.
Okay.
And then I slow it down by 3 octaves, and you can there's still, when you slow things down, you lose the highs because there's nothing there from the recording. This actually had all those highs, so it's extra special ASMR. I don't think anyone will be aware of that without me telling them, but I enjoyed, shooting it at high frame rate so I could slow it down and recording the sound and then slowing the whole thing down. Yeah, so I like ASMR. I think it's a thing, and there's actually the statement that some of the films might be kind of like an ASMR experience. I take that as a positive. Because you're kind of focusing on sound, you're kind of sitting back into the sound and letting the sound kind of soothe you. I think it must be doing something to a similar part of the brain.
Like a brain massage.
Yeah.
Like the centerpiece of White Ash is like, it brings different feelings too. It's almost like frightening when the death metal guitar kind of adds to that, but
Yeah, that's an aggressive part. Yeah, that's wake up, and it's not good news part.
Really intense. Like, I was like, oh no, am I going to come back from this, man? This trip's going bad.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden it releases you into the nice leaves and the water comes in and everything.
Yeah.
It's a really cool structure.
Thank you. Well, and that is kind of thinking about contrast, because if the whole thing just kind of goes, and this is part of the problem I have with ASMR, you kind of get in it and it just kind of keeps doing what it's doing. There's a durational effect. Mm-hmm. It doesn't change a lot. So in things like White Ash and Deck, I'm aware that I'm going someplace, and if I'm going to still have people be aware of the place I've taken them, I have to present some contrast sometimes so they know they can get back to it or leave it. I'm interested in the thresholds, how we get into and out of a state or a kind of an idea of a place in a film. So that aggressive part where you're looking at trees and you hear the guitar come in, the distorted guitar, it is to kind of say, and there's other ways to feel. And then by the end, it goes back and it gets super, super quiet by the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny that kind of, I was reading the other day about Citizen Kane, and there's this part towards like the probably like 3/4 of the way into the movie where there's this loud peacock screech sound, and apparently people have been trying to figure out what this means for years, and apparently Wells said in a bar it was just a way to get back any of the audience that had fallen asleep by that point.
That's pretty cool. I don't remember that. I'll have to watch the movie again.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I mean, the fact that you'd be afraid somebody would be falling asleep during Citizen Kane, although, I mean, I guess like when he's making it, it's not, Citizen Kane, it's just like it's just a boy in his sled,
Yeah, so even he could have anxieties about how they're going to be so bored by this. Yeah. I think we all have. Well, I don't know. Speaking for myself, I go, who cares? Okay, the answer is put in a loud peacock screech, whatever you feel that. Yeah.
Well, we've had a lot of conversations about sleeping during movies on this show. Because like when the first time Ron and I ever hung out, I was screening the film that Brian and I had made at my apartment, and he fell asleep in the middle, and he like owned up to it. I was really impressed. And it's the kind of movie that it is sleepy, right? There's a lot of, it's a sleepy kind of movie. And so what are your opinions about people sleeping during films, or what are experiences you've had falling asleep during movies? And I feel like a lot of mine are positive, but... Well,
I think it's okay. I'm not speaking generally. I'm really speaking about mine. I fall asleep. I edit standing up because that prevents me from falling asleep. If I'm sitting, it's like, boom, and then I wake up, I just made all kinds of edits with my forehead. So, I mean, that's just, if that happens, I see that as it could be a positive, it could be a negative, but it is something about slowing the brain down. And actually in screenings, I've said, just watch, let this experience, if I'm doing like a whole, like showing 90 minutes worth of stuff or an hour or something like that, I'll tell people, let it wash over you. Don't worry about whether you're getting it or what the story is. Right. And I don't even care if you fall asleep, because I think something is happening, however you fell asleep, and then when you wake back up, assuming you do, I think those are interesting moments. So I actually, I don't take it as an insult. I just take it as, okay, they're exhausted, showing it to students. Often they're just exhausted, they fall asleep right away. But I see it as I think it's okay. It's part of the whole thing of creating a state where you can fall asleep and you can wake back up and you're still having an experience. You didn't see a lot of stuff, but you heard stuff, and who knows how that had an influence.
And I think there's some movies that I remember when I was in college, I went to a midnight screening of David Lynch's Inland Empire. And, that movie is like 3 hours and change. And I think I was taking micro naps throughout the movie. And I came out of it thinking like, wow, this is a great movie. And every time I've watched it since then, it's like, this is kind of an incoherent mess. And I think it was a movie that was made to be periodically slept to almost. It's like part of the experience. Like you should, like a lot of those cult movies, the reason they show them, or maybe a byproduct of watching them in the middle of the night, is that I think your brain kind of receives things differently when you're really tired.
Or stoned or whatever.
Or stoned, yeah. That's a kind of tired.
Yeah.
Again.
I watched White Ash like right before bed last night in complete darkness, and it was kind of perfect, like to just enter a dream state right before bed.
Oh, good. That's not because that ends almost silently. The last 3 to 4 minutes. You know?
Right. Yeah. Ask care.
This is great. Now I've got another filmmaker that I could fall back on to justify my taking naps during movies.
What?
Well, I mean, when you take naps during movies, it's like pretty. So Ron and I watched 2001: A Space Odyssey together, and Ron has seen that movie probably 25 times, and he falls asleep in the middle when there's that sequence with all the like air hissing vent noises, and he snored along to it like he was doing karaoke at exactly like 1 second, 10 minutes. I was like texting everybody about it. It was like the craziest thing I ever saw. Like I asked him afterwards, like, was that just you? Even if it was just trolling me, it was like kind of incredible. But no, he just in his head, I guess you've like memorized the hissing air vent sequence from 2001: A Space Odyssey. I don't know.
I'm sure. I mean, I remember I was waking up and saying, how did we get to this point? I know, like, and I could tell, I knew exactly like what I had missed and exactly what scene and how long it had been. And I was like, wow, I must have been asleep for a while. Mm-hmm. How did we get to this point? And I was still enjoying the movie because.
But sleeping is okay. Snoring, though, that's another story. Because that gets dangerous, and which also goes for popcorn. Man, I don't know why people. I know why people eat popcorn, but it's like I get when I'm having a screening and then everyone's there with their buckets of popcorn. If it's at that kind of a place, it's just like, oh man, now everyone's gonna be listening to the chewing sound. Anyway, that's my little pet peeve.
I was at a Nick Dorsey screening and someone had like a bag of chips. You could just, you could just see everyone's while you're like, you could tell they were trying to be quiet, but
you can't do that. But yeah,
I almost feel like I want to make a movie now where it, like only screen it in places that don't allow food, but just add the sound of somebody chewing chips onto just to make everybody hungry
in Atmos, so it's coming from all around. Yeah.
Since we're on,
is an emotion that's been ignored by the cinema.
Since we're on, like,
what was that?
I was gonna say, since we're on like kind of a silly tangent, I had another silly question, which is for you, Leighton, while you're out. Have you ever had problems with people just being like, "What the heck are you doing? Why are you waving your camera or taking pictures of that telephone pole?" Or are you mostly by yourself? Or I'm sure your family's used to it at this point.
Yeah, well, the last statement caused a pause because some are more used to it than that. Well, I don't recall much. I mean, if I'm running around with a still camera like I did for Deck and White Ash, a lot of that there aren't many people around.
Right.
I have a whole nother thing I could do in Brooklyn when I lived in Brooklyn when I was at Pratt. Kind of all this city stuff, and I don't know. It's just a guy with a camera. Everyone has a camera in New York. Right?
Yeah, people don't seem to mind so much, depending on where you are. In the suburbs, people tend to be a little more.
Well, you had that
part of the suburbs.
The road where the guy was like about to get into a fist fight, and he's like, "Why are you filming garbage?"
Yeah, he really wanted an explanation of like why we liked garbage floating through the wind down an alleyway and seagulls eating it. And we were like, it's an experimental film, and he's like, that's not good enough, and like threw a can into our shot.
But you had
the movie.
Did you have several people?
Yeah, we were in a crowded urban environment, I think, at that point.
Well, there was the two of us, and we were. Yeah, it was Seattle.
Yeah.
I think there's, I mean, if I'm wandering around alone with a camera, it's more people tend to leave you alone. But if you have 2 people or 3 people all attending to something, then it draws people.
There was at least 2 of us, and then there may have been someone with us as well. So I can see why. I think that's true.
I have a friend in India, in Assam. Actually, it's just I met him through Instagram, and he just shot a film, and he wrote to me saying it was so interesting because you have the crew there and they're doing whatever this film is, and then you have people who gather to watch it. And he would go and talk to them in a very casual way, and they would all speculate about what this film was about just from watching the shoot. Mm-hmm. And he said that's very much like Sufi storytelling, where the storyteller tells a story and everyone's expected to pull pieces from it and integrate it into their own stories.
Okay.
So I have this interest in ambient people. I don't tend to find them. Actually, the way I shoot doesn't really encourage them to come forward. But I really like that idea that you're doing a thing, people think you're doing something else, and actually that has some value. So why not find out what that is and carry it forward?
Yeah, I made a movie when I think it was with you, Daniel. We went to the 9/11 memorial and just started filming it.
We shot together, yeah.
And then the movie became about the other people gathering around, filming and taking pictures of the memorial, because when we went over there, like, people started to gather and do the same thing. And it was really interesting how it was like this magnetic effect.
Oh, yeah, that's a great place to people watch. I hope that's not coming across as insensitive, but just like it's... God, I mean, I have some horror story. Like when I was at Occupy Wall Street, one of the guys that I got close with, who would do cleanup, he was doing those like tourist bus tours that would go by the 9/11 memorial, mm-hmm. and it gets a wide variety of responses, and it's almost more interesting what 9/11 is in people's heads than just sort of the rock that's there.
Yeah, that's a strange... You're talking about the waterfall thing?
This was before the waterfall. There was just like oh god, it looks like one of those Vietnam memorials. It's just like a long list of names, and then like there's like a relief.
Got some firefighters and on it, and
never forget something, I think, on it. This was back before they built back when the Freedom Tower was just kind of just like a big hole in the ground.
It was like halfway up, I think. There were still grids going up the sides.
Yeah, because I remember during Occupy Wall Street, that was just like a giant safety hazard. There was just this crater in the ground down the street. Maybe they'd finished half of it, and it was just the other half of it was still, but yeah, there was just like a lot of, and they had to guard it because it's like lawsuit city if you fall into the hole.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have any questions, Ron?
No, I'm like I said, I'm glad to hear somebody else give me the okay to nod off during the movie.
Well, we have a special for the 100th episode. We have a special episode planned where Ron falls asleep in the middle of the episode.
I've done that while editing. And I'll start get into the groove, and I start feeling really comfortable listening to something I participated in. It's a different experience, and then I was like, oh wow, I remember this part. Oh yeah, this is really okay. This is pay attention. Like the whole thing ended. So
there are movies I've tried to fall asleep through.
Like for good or bad reasons.
Well, just this is agony. I can't leave. At least I can maybe sleep.
Yeah.
Oh no! If it's agony, I stay awake. I can't. I don't.
A little bit of masochism there.
Huh?
Yeah. I just kind of, if the movie's bad enough, I remember all my like Sunday school religious education, which was mostly about the Holocaust, and I think I have to go out and bear witness to how bad this movie was. Like I get like on a moral high horse.
You have a mission.
Reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I made a mistake. You know James Benning's films?
Yep.
Uh-huh.
So, and you know, he used to always do 10-minute shots because that's how long a 400-foot roll of film is. When he shot the video, I was at the New York Film Festival and he showed Ruhr, R-U-H-R, the in Germany.
Right.
And I watched, I didn't read any program notes, but just read, I was just watching the film. So I chose not to read any program notes ahead of time. So the first, I don't know, 3 or 4 shots are 15, 20 minutes. I said, oh yeah, digital, he can go however long. And then the last one started, I said, okay, this will be another 15, 20 minute thing. It's, you know, going to be a nice length. But that one went on for an hour. Really, I was in this state where I learned 15 minutes, you know, shots. And then 15-minute pass, I looked at my watch, it was 20 minutes, it was 30 minutes, I kept going. And that was really something to deal with. If I had the program notes, I would have known that last shot was an hour, but I didn't. So,
well, he's done a few since then where it's just 1 hour long shot, right? I think there was that one of like a rail, like a train being assembled or something.
There's a train one. There's one in the woods that, anyway, I've had arguments with him. And then there's the one he didn't even shoot. It's the flag during Hurricane something, in a flag outside of on a pier in North Carolina with a, you know, a webcam on it that he found on the internet. So, but that one, you know, is just going to go on forever. So how you watch it, I mean, I hope. The thing we didn't talk about, not to open up a whole new thing, but installation, because there's something attractive about installations where people don't sit down and say, okay, it's going to be a half-hour film, and they're sitting in seats and they watch it. You come in and you have the artist has to kind of draw people in and keep them there for some duration based on the content itself. I find that to be an interesting realm, and I wish I could do more installations. The problem with installations is you have to get a space and all that.
Yeah. I hope I get to see one day when the pandemic has calmed down a little bit and we can do that kind of thing. Yeah. Because I've never seen any of your installations.
Yeah, they're harder to see. The best one really happened in Iowa, and another one in Nebraska, both places that not a lot of people go to. So
right, yeah.
I remember with our movie, we originally, or not originally, but like at some point, I think I had an idea where it was going to be 4 screens. We were going to bribe somebody at a Walmart to put it in the back of the Walmart where they have the deck chairs and the TVs, and just run it until the Walmart manager figured out it was going on. We never finished. I bet you could bribe a Walmart employee for really cheap right now.
I like that idea. I think, you know, now's the time. Try some things like that.
Or Best Buy, just take all over their walls of TVs and.
I mean, at Best Buy, they probably just like let you rent out the back of the store at this point. I think they're
yeah.
You got $20? All right, it's yours.
But yeah, I think the installation thing, it definitely emphasizes too, like the moving picture as a space versus as like an entertainment or a thing that you got the dual layers of, you know, the space of the film and then the architecture surrounding the film.
Yeah. Well, I think it is. Actually, I think it is architecture. Well, if it's not all of them are, but
yeah.
I approach it with, I'm actually redesigning this room as an experience, and also giving up the idea of a beginning and an end, because you don't control that. People want to have it, and how do you accommodate that? I think that's a super interesting problem. It's not a problem, just a super interesting thing to think about, because they come in whenever, and then how do you let them have this experience? What do you make in terms of sound and image that will allow them to linger? And the one in Iowa that I did was 13 12-minute loops on all these columns and structures, and I found that super interesting because it was bigger than I could conceive or even control. So my experience was like, wow, this is weird and interesting. And people would linger in there for hours. You couldn't see the loops, and it was complex enough, and you couldn't see it from all one place, and they would just hang out. So I felt really good about that. The only bad thing was it was in Iowa City, so I don't know, a couple hundred people probably saw it.
But that's amazing. Mostly, you go to any art museum, people tend to just wander through really quickly, snap a few pictures maybe, and then carry on. To have someone be in there for hours is like you're doing something right.
Yeah, it was more like a garden. They would go in and they just hang out and kind of chill, and then go on with their life. Often students and also medical people, because they would write to me, doctors who say, "This is so great, I could just go in there on my lunch." So that was kind of nice.
That's cool.
I guess does anybody have any final questions? Leighton, do you have any? Is there something you've been like chomping at the bit to talk about and we never got to it?
No, I just thought of the installation. It's been fun talking to you all.
Oh,
yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's really good to virtually meet you.
Yeah, it's good to see you and talk.
So I guess, all right, we'll do the sign off. I'm still Dan.
And I'm still Ron.
And I'm still Brian.
I'm still Leighton.
And we'll see you all at the movies.
Right.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you very much. I enjoyed this a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have a great day.